What do you think is the main thing that holds people back from high performance when it matters the most?
Well, I think there's two parts to that question. You know, you add the when it matters the most, and that's a really important, nuanced, esoteric phrase. And I love this phrase, when it matters most, because if you listen to ESPN or you listen to Fox Sports or you listen to any of those, types of shows, they'll say that big game, defining play, defining moment. And there really isn't such a thing. And so when it matters most is now. It's not later. It's not the Super Bowl. It's not your Everest. It's not the pitch that you're going to give to a VC firm. That's not the moment. The moment is now, and it's always now, and it's now again. And if we are present, it's now again, and it's always now. And so the idea is that there's no such thing as a moment later that's more important than the one you have now. Because again, this is very esoteric. If we were to strip away your ability and my ability to live in this present moment, then we don't have life, right? It's the absence of life.
Yeah.
But what happens for most of us is that if you think about this moment a little bit like a raindrop, like it's moving, okay? And eventually it'll crash, death, if you will. But like this raindrop that's moving, we can be on the edges of the raindrop or we could be right in the center. We don't ever leave our raindrop, our unique raindrop. But when we go to the edges of the raindrop, it's like we are not fully in the present moment. And so what gets in the way? Anxiety, worry. What do they think of me? What if it goes wrong?
Yeah.
Do I have what it takes? Am I going to embarrass myself? Am I going to let people down? So that anxiety is a real condition. It's estimated that, the research suggests that 15% of Americans suffer, and that's the word, from anxiety. The estimate is probably more like 30% suffer, and it's a mental disorder, and anxiety by definition is the excessive worry about what could go wrong. So that's at the root. That's at the center.
What's the opposite of anxiety?
Groundedness. Yeah, a sense of poise and presence.
Focusing on what could go right?
Yeah, well, not even that, but like, yes, right? So if anxiety is worrying about what could go wrong, an antidote for that experience is focusing on what could go right, what could be fantastic.
Yeah, living in gratitude.
That's right, yeah, which obviously you're familiar with. But the essence of it is coming back to the center of that raindrop, that esoteric thing I'm talking about, like that falling raindrop, to time your ability to be right in the center. And what does that mean? That you're grounded, you're present, your mind is on time with what's happening. And so you've heard great athletes talk about the game slows down.
Yeah.
It doesn't slow down. That's not what happens, is that our mind becomes fully syncopated at the speed of life. And we're on time. And so when we're finally on time, it's such a relief, like, oh my God, this is the speed of light. This is amazing.
Yeah.
And so we don't ever have the power to slow down time. We just have the power to increase our ability to be on time.
That's
right?
cool.
On this moment, then the next moment, then the next moment.
Yeah.
The worried mind is behind time or ahead of time.
How do we define success? Can a bus driver on the street be defined as successful and the guy who's the CEO of that business not successful?
So when I started out on this journey, I had the same definition of success as almost everyone, which is I thought, the more powerful you are, the more wealthy you are, the more successful you are. The Forbes list idea. It wasn't until I met Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple Computers, that he completely redefined my understanding of success. He helped me realize that, if you put Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak side by side, most people will say Steve Jobs was more successful. But Wozniak helped me realize that success has much more to do with how you define it, how you look within yourself and ask yourself, what do I actually want? What makes me happy? And if what makes you happy is driving a bus and coming home at 5 p.m. and picking up your kids and playing catch with them, and you're the CEO of a company and never see your kids, you're not successful. If you're miserable, if you're not doing what you want to do, that's not success.
So should we broaden ideas of what it means? Is our definition flawed?
I believe that the natural human and really Western definition of success, which is more money, more power, more prestige, isn't right. Look, it might be right for some people who want that, but for the vast majority of people who want to be, a mother and working and helping at their kid's school, or a father who wants to be, involved with their community. I think the idea of the more Twitter followers you have and the more money you have is a flawed model. You have to look within yourself and ask yourself what you want.
You're gonna play big, say big. Big. You're gonna play huge, say huge. Huge. You're gonna play ginormous, say ginormous. But first, take baby steps. You're gonna eat the elephant, but take one small bite first, chew it good. Right? We want so much so fast. My grandmother says baby, she starts every sentence with baby. I'm sure it's because she cannot remember all of our names. She said, baby, the best things you'll ever have from grandma will never come from the microwave. They always come from the oven. And I was like, I think somehow she's trying to give me a lesson here. And I realized that the best things that you're gonna create are gonna take time. Build it on cement, not sinking sand. You're gonna get tons and tons and tons of tools here. And you're gonna wanna fast forward. When you fast forward, you're building on plexiglass, you're building on styrofoam, you're building on wood, you wanna build it on cement. Your dream is important enough to outlive you. Yes, yes? And so I realized that you can't Google download resiliency. You can't Google download tenacity. You can't Google download forgiveness. There are some of the best qualities and characteristics that's gonna take you a long way that you need to invest time in and energy in and intention in. You don't just get patience. I want patience, I'm waiting for patience. Somebody's gonna piss you off tomorrow. And now you get to test if you have patience. I realized that as I wanted to develop me, I had to be willing to climb, and I wanted to get to the top, and there's no elevator to the top. I gotta do my squats. I gotta work on my quads and my hamstrings and my calves, because I gotta climb to the top. We gotta climb.
I probably got paid about $350,000 in my first 13 years of law practice total. And I had an army of children and no capital to start with. And when I chose this alternative career, I had over $300,000 in liquid instruments. So I had, and that was 10 years of living expenses. So I was not a courageous, venturesome, admirable man. I was a cautious little squirrel, saving up more nuts than I really needed and not going very deep into my pile of nuts. And so it wasn't that courageous, and I kept one foot in the law firm while I tried my capitalist career. But as soon as the capitalist career succeeded, I intended to lift that second foot because I recognized that the potential of law practice, as I saw it then, I didn't anticipate the boom that came to the big firms. I just saw it as being more difficult, and I wanted more independence than I was going to have as a lawyer. I hated sending other people invoices and needing money from richer people. I thought it was undignified. I wanted my own money. Not because I loved ease or social prestige. I wanted the independence.
Just the last 15 minutes of this podcast was so strong for Monday morning about where it all starts with your mind. People don't really believe that shit. But it's true, Rudy. For me, it started when I said, I'm getting into comedy. I don't give a fuck about my credit bureau. I don't give a fuck about the credit card people. I don't give a fuck about the banks. I don't give a fuck about what I drive. I don't give a fuck about what my clothes on. Because at the end, it doesn't really matter unless you're happy. For years, I worried about my job, and I gotta have white sneakers or not. I gotta have a black shirt on it. Who gives a fuck? At the end of the day, I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy. I didn't get happy till I started driving cross country with a pair of shorts on and stinky sneakers and a t-shirt. And you got 3 pair of jeans and 3 shirts, and they're lasting you all week, dog. You got like 4 pair of socks, and you get on the stage. That's when I really started getting happy. When I started waking up in the morning and knew I had to drive 200 miles, and I had $32.50 in quarters, and I had to get lunch with that, reefer, and gas to get me to that next location. For some reason, I'd be happy. A lot happier than making $1,200 a week and paying my bills. I was like, this is what I like. I like this. So it's food for thought. Sometimes it's not about the money or the dollars. It's about what brings a smile to your face. And once you find it, let yourself go. Don't think about it. Don't look back. Don't compare prices. Don't listen to your uncle about taking that roofing job for $1,250 for stability. You know what? Stability's overrated, dog. Stability's overrated.
Absolutely.
I think happiness is doing what you want to the hilt. And even if you're broke, I was in comedy for 12 years before I saw a dime. Yeah, well, you were getting paid, but nothing to write home about. I could have quit at any time in those 12 years and found a job. I would have tricked somebody into being an indoor salesman. I didn't want to do that. I would have rather live on $8,000 a year and do my own thing and around at night and smoke pot with your stupid buddies and get on stage than go into an office. Insurance, who gives a f***? When you think about insurance, that's when you need insurance. For 30 years, I ran around with no insurance. Nothing ever happened to me.
But to come through on your word, it allows the guys that you're leading, male or female, to be able to say, okay, we can follow this person because he won't let us down. You know, for me, as the leader of our franchise and the leader of my household and the leader of so many, different things, I think it's the confidence, but it's also you practicing what you preach. I'm not a guy who just talks about it. I actually go out and do it as well, from a basketball perspective or from a leadership perspective with my kids at my foundation. We have a promise initiative where they promise me that they will go to school, they will listen to their teachers, they'll be great to their classmates, and I promise them that I will continue to be a great role model, a father figure for them, and not let those guys down. So I take that responsibility, and I don't just talk about it, I actually do it as well. So when you're able to come through on your word, it allows the guys that you're leading, male or female, to be able to say, okay, we can follow this person because he won't let us down. No matter if it's going good or bad. Every day is not a bed of roses. We understand that, and you have to be able to handle adversity as well.
Another quality that I think is important is kind of being flexible-minded or open-minded. I'm not saying you shouldn't have a vision for your idea or your product, but you need to be open to changes.
You should find a great partner no matter what it is that you're doing. And you should look for someone who is very high intelligence, very high energy, and very high integrity. And you need all three of those. You can't compromise on any one of them. Otherwise, you'll end up with either someone who's not smart, which does you no good, or someone who's not hardworking, which also does you no good, or the worst case is you end up with a smart, hardworking crook who ends up working against your interests. And integrity is something that takes a lot of time spent with someone to figure out.
We know from our past experiences that big things start small. The biggest oak starts from an acorn, and you've got to recognize, if you want to do anything new, you've got to be willing to let that acorn grow into a little sapling and then finally into a small tree, and maybe one day it'll be a big business on its own.
And in fact, that's one of the mottos for one of your initiatives, and forgive my pronunciation of the Latin, but Gradatim ferociter. What does that mean to you? Well,
It means step by step ferociously, and it's the motto for Blue Origin. Basically, you can't skip steps. You have to put one foot in front of the other. Things take time. There are no shortcuts, but you want to do those steps with passion and ferocity.
There are a lot of things that are outside of your control. A lot of external circumstances will determine the success of your idea, whether the market timing's right for this new kind of service, or whether people, whether a customer, like the economy's right for your kind of service, right? Whether you meet the right people who will finance your company. Many external circumstances are outside of your control and but will affect the outcome, and you have to be okay with that.
It looks like you always go out of your comfort zone, right? Coming onto an island that was completely deserted, no fresh water, you didn't even have the money to buy it, and now you're sleeping on a tent on the beach trying to figure out how to get fresh water here. You do that often. You did it with the airline.
I was just somebody that experienced the bad experience of traveling on airlines. I was actually trying to get to the BVI, the British Virgin Islands, one day from Puerto Rico, and this same lovely lady was waiting for me, and I'd been away for 3 weeks, and American Airlines bumped the flight. And so I went to the back of the airport, I hired a plane, I hired a blackboard, I wrote Virgin Airlines one-way, $29 to the BVI, went around all the people who'd been bumped, and I filled my first plane. And that got me thinking, you know, that airlines do bump people. They don't care about you or me, particularly in the air. And so so I then rang up Boeing and said, do you have any second-hand 747s?
No kidding. I mean, it was literally that. You just sat in the airport and said, I'm starting an airline right now because I'm frustrated.
Exactly. And I think most of the best entrepreneurial ideas come out of frustration. I think, you know, if you're frustrated about something, the best way of sorting it out is get out and do it, and you've got yourself a business.
My mom passed away about almost 3 years ago, and she always would tell me, she was like, whatever you do, I know you're doing all this football stuff, you're doing all these other things, but never forget, you're an artist, babe. You're an artist. I'm telling you, when I see what I'm doing right now, and I get to do so many things that so many people never got to see. I get to go so many places and do so many things that none of the people who wanted to were able to. I feel like there is a responsibility, but also if I don't do it, everything they've gone through is nothing. You know, so the way I approach things is really, it's kind of for everyone else. You know, I have to try it. I have to go for it. I like to call myself a motivational doer. I hate talking so much. Like, I'm a big talker, as you can tell. But the big thing is, I want to back everything up with action. I want to be an action figure. Like, always back it up with movement. Don't talk about working out. You can do it all day, but do it. And that was the big distinction I've seen, especially growing up in the hood. So many people, man, I'm finna do this, I'm finna. And man, I said, man, well, why haven't you? Why aren't you? And so everything you see me doing, I just said, I'm going, I'm trying, I'm going for it, I don't care, and we'll see what happens.
I do think that one thing that's important is, especially if you're a founder or a technical founder, is to realize that you can't do everything, and even if you can, you shouldn't.
I think you should be spending your money on teaching and sharing, and so that might mean hiring a writer or two, perhaps, instead of a marketing person. You know, and start writing and start getting people to listen to what you're saying. You can't talk about yourself all the time because no one's going to come back for that, but you have to talk about things that are relevant to your industry or ideas that you have and start to build that audience up.
Try to do something that you would want to do anyway, whether it doesn't necessarily have to be a very successful business, because when you do decide to become an entrepreneur and start a business, chances are it's not going to become like a multi-million-dollar business. So at least do something that you love in the beginning so that even if it fails, you'd still enjoy it.
The definition of values is they're the behaviors or principles that you religiously adhere to within your company. When I say religious, I mean that no amount of data will sway you from those principles, and the degree to which that you have the courage to maintain your conviction around those ideas is the degree to which you're going to be successful over the long term.
The most important thing when you're working with people early is that you guys line up on what your goals are. That sounds really basic, but you can totally, it can be fine. You can want to build a small business that makes money and you don't have to go to an office every day. Or you can want to build a huge company. You can want to build Google, but I think you have to be really, really aligned on that.
So the most important part of getting to a goal is to start feeling it now, is to start acting as if, right? If you want to be that leader, if you want to be that author, if you want to be that painter, all it takes is one action, and you truly are in the process of becoming it. So it's funny that I am literally basically done with the book, and I'm like, can I call myself an author yet? I've written a book. Of course, because you have taken the action, you're doing the actions. There is no final anointing of anyone. There's no ceremony, there's no fireworks. You just start acting as if and feeling it and envisioning it and picturing it. And soon enough, you become it, right? So everybody starts somewhere. So whether you are a famous ballerina or an Olympic swimmer, they all started somewhere. They all had to take that first class. They all had to take that first leap into the water, right? And at what point can you start calling yourself a swimmer, a dancer, an author? It's the second that you start taking action and you start thinking it and you're feeling it, right? It's about embodying it. So my biggest tip for you is to start seeing yourself as that person and start taking the small actions of being that person that you want to be. That's the only thing that is separating you from actually being it. So you have to act as if in order to really start getting that ball rolling, and all of a sudden you are.
So just go and do it, try, learn from it. You'll fail at some things. That's a learning experience that you need so that you can take that on to the next experience. And don't let people who you may respect and who you believe know what they're talking about, don't let them tell you it can't be done. Because often they will tell you it can't be done, and it's just because they don't have the courage to try it.
Ben Graham in his low teens looked around and he looked at the people he admired and he said, I want to be admired, so why don't I just behave like them? And he found there was nothing impossible about behaving like them. And similarly, he did the same thing on the reverse side in terms of getting rid of those qualities.
From the time I was 7 years old, every Saturday I would go for 4 hours of acting class every Saturday.
Whoa.
And I loved it. I just loved it. To the point where all the kids graduated and went on to this other stuff, and I started doing adult acting classes, and then I was in the commercial classes, and then I loved like the hair and makeup classes and just everything. I just couldn't get enough.
I try and be decisive. I try and, even if I don't know what the hell I'm doing, I try to be decisive because I think it's very comforting and reassuring and important to the people that are working with you to feel that whoever is in charge knows what they're doing and knows what they're thinking, and that if it's a yes, it's a yes, and it's a no, it's a no. I mean, I don't think of myself as a boss. I mean, I think of myself as someone who's giving direction and guidance and vice versa.
I think great entrepreneurs must have the curiosity to kind of metaphorically see around the corner. What's coming? What can I anticipate that other people don't see? And then you must have the courage of your convictions to execute the strategy.
One way to conceptualize what makes a good product is, good engineering is part of it, good design is part of it, but really it's, one way I think about it is maximizing the probability that someone shows up at the front door of your store or your website or whatever it is and ends up with a solved problem.
And oftentimes the best methodology is to start with the perfect experience with just one person, get that right, and then figure out how to scale something great instead of scaling something not so great and then trying to improve it. That's really hard to do.
Has acting turned out to be all that you wanted it to be?
It's incredible. It's incredible. I never knew that I could do it as a career. I never knew. It was the first memory that I had. It's the first thing I can think of is saying, I want to be an actor to my parents. And if I hadn't lived in Los Angeles and been in such close proximity to sort of the mecca of movie making, if I didn't have parents that said, okay, we'll drive you to auditions, we didn't have the economic means to, move camp from Idaho to Los Angeles because some snotty 10-year-old kid says, I want to be an actor. We did it, and after school I got to go on auditions, but it was always, and I've said this before, it felt like an elite group of people, and it felt like I would never belong to them. So once I got the opportunity to, for example, get the movie This Boy's Life with Robert De Niro, I said, wow, now I'm able to I might be able to steer the course of my career. I might be able to have a career similar to these guys that I so admire. And that I knew at 15 years old was the biggest gift in the world, and that's never left me. I've never that thirst or that hunger for wanting to give one great performance that I'm truly satisfied with, or be in one movie that I said, I love this film, is something that I don't know will ever be quenched. I don't know, and I think that's a good thing, because it keeps pushing you. You know, you're constantly dissatisfied. In other words.
And so I think when you are starting a new business, you don't want to go after giant markets. You want to go after small markets, and you want to take over those markets quickly.
Go talk to people who failed at what you're doing, and who are no longer doing it. There always are those people. So you started a startup, you know, you look at the history of your space. I'm so surprised how many people I talk to, founders who have no idea the history of their own space. And there's some nice naivete to that, in the sense that, like, oh, you're gonna do it differently. And there's some truth to that. But like, when you get down to making it work, and now you're into it already, you've kind of established what you're doing, and you have some problems, then I'd go talk to all these people who failed, because you'll uncover all sorts of interesting things that you could try.
You know, I looked at lots of companies and why I thought they don't succeed over time. We've had a more rapid turnover of companies. And I said, what did they fundamentally do wrong? Like, what do those companies all do wrong? And usually it's just they miss the future. And so I think, for me, I just tried to focus on that and say, what is that future really going to be, and how do we create it?
I do believe that organizations, human organizations, are inherently unstable. They will fall over, and you have to work to keep them upright. But they fall slowly. Most people don't notice it. They let their success blind them. They don't see it falling over. The falling takes place slow, but the collapse is quick. You have to do constant assessment. You have to look for the hard truths.
That whatever you do, somebody can do it better. You have to bring your A game in every single day. There's nothing unique about any one individual. What's unique is their passion, their ability to execute, to meet targets and exceed them. The minute you lose that ability, in capitalism, you're gone. It's a fair trade. The engine that makes you rich can take it all away from you. There are no guarantees. I think that's incredibly important.
There's a lot of conventional wisdom out there, built up over time and built through all the learnings from all the companies. And this may be fully applicable to most of the companies out there. But before it's applied to your organization, I highly recommend that you question it, because it could be absolutely fatal for your success.
I've learned and experienced is that, you know, if you don't open up and you don't delegate, then you'll kill yourself. And if there's one thing that I've managed to understand is the art of delegation, because if I can pass on, you know, to Claire Smith, to Arian, my palette, my understanding, my knowledge, then grab it, run it, and then pass it on to your team. Don't hold that inside.
I was with a bunch of other investors who I respect, and they brought me a deal, and I wanted to be part of it, but it didn't feel right. And I wrote millions of dollars on that one, and it just didn't feel right, and I lost it all within 2 years.
So should investors trust their gut then?
Absolutely, and trust your gut.
But what about, you said earlier, don't be emotional, and sometimes the gut is emotional.
No, this is a barometer of risk. It's something internalized for an investor that says, I don't feel comfortable. It's not about emotion, it's just don't write that check. That was recently the first time I didn't listen to that, and I lost everything. So now my radar is up. I listen to my gut. It's not an emotion, it's an index of risk. And you get it as you age. You become a better investor every year. If only I could live to 200, I'd be really good.
Many kids and many grown-ups do figure out over time what their passions are. And sometimes we let I don't think it's that hard. I think what happens though sometimes is that we let our intellectual selves overrule those passions. And so that's what needs to be guarded against.
Compassion for yourself, of course, is as important as compassion for others. When you, often I get asked questions like people who did something that they now realize was deeply wrong in the past. Sometimes people ask questions about they brought up their children in a way that they now realize was not very conscious, and so that they may have caused suffering to their children, or other people find they have caused suffering to loved ones, and they now realize that what they did was wrong. And again, I say this is an example where you need to be compassionate with yourself, because no human being can act beyond their level of consciousness. So that was your level of consciousness at the time, and you could not go beyond that. And again here, to make demands upon yourself, up to a point it might be a good thing to if you, as long as you enjoy it, it's a wonderful thing. When the enjoyment of what you're doing is lost, then you have to be careful, because there you have to come to a stop and say, okay, there's something here that's not right, because I'm no longer enjoying what I'm doing.
You already know who you are. And that peace that we're after lies somewhere beyond personality. Your need for acceptance can make you invisible in this world. Don't let anything stand in the way of the light that shines through this form. Risk being seen in all of your glory.
As soon as I got off the phone call with him, and then also when he said, it's not in the picture now, but I think it'd be great if Dallas danced at the end, and my heartbeat went up on the phone, and I started breaking a cold sweat, like going, no, that's not. And as soon as I went, oh no, that's not that, the other devil in my ear said, I dare you, dude. And I just went, of course. I think yes. Because I immediately noticed, if you don't, you're wussing out, dude. Are you kidding me? You will forever regret. You have to. So as soon as I got over that, I was like, well, that's inevitable. I'm doing it. Now, I got to bust my ass to go do it the best I can. And there was a lot of fear in that. I mean, that was, yeah, that was some majorly good anxiety and fear. And then, now I'm saying by that time, now everything, my choices from that phone call on were, anything I was nervous about, you have to go, f it. No, dude, go. All the way, go. Meet midnight. Yes, can y'all meet me for another choreograph session? 8 a.m. Sunday morning. Do you got an hour? I'm gonna go stand in the mirror. My wife's over there watching, reading something. I'm gonna stand in the mirror and I'm gonna practice a move. This is really embarrassing. Well, too bad, man. Do it in the mirror right now, because the less embarrassing that gets, hopefully the more comfortable you'll be when you're out there in front of 80 people and a bunch of cameras. And one thing you do when you go out there, don't come up short. Go all the way.
So when we see a kid with a lemonade stand, it's different than when we see a vending machine selling lemonade, even if it's exactly the same product, because the story around it is what people are paying for. So when I meet small business people, all I ask them is not what's their balance sheet, but what's their story. Why should I pick you? Why do I care about what you're doing? And if you start giving me all this inside baseball statistics about why you're 2% better than some other competitor, I'm already glazed over, because that's not part of the way I see the world.
But what you really need to do is think about what is the smallest possible test that I can run for this idea, for this concept, for this theory, get it out there, and get customers using it. Because your customers are going to be the ones to tell you if it's really working or not.
If you're not utilizing an online community, then you're at a disadvantage to those who are. You can be asking online communities what they think about your ideas, or if they have any advice with what you're working on. Not only will you hear from people who are passionate about the subject, but you'll be hearing from people all around the world, each with their own experiences and stories that can help you.
Once you have the passion, the thing that you're passionate about now, you can look at other people or other entities or other things or works of art, and you can draw things from that to help you be better at what you do by looking for those common denominators. Johnny wanted to know, how do I prepare? How do I prepare? How do I study? How do I view the game? How do you build your game? And my response is much like the way he builds products. You think sequentially. Yeah, you look at this, the end result of what you want to create, but in order to create that, there's so many other little things that go into this massive entity or device. And it's no different than building my basketball game. You start with, what do you want your game to be? What would make your game most unstoppable or hard to deal with? And now you work backwards from there. And you start building it one piece at a time, one move at a time, one counter at a time. So there's a lot of similarities there.
You want an idea about what you can say. I know it sounds like a bad idea, but here's specifically why it's actually a great one. You want to sound crazy, but you want to actually be right.
Because when you're trying to differentiate, when you're trying to do something different, there's going to be that gut moment, that gut sense. Is this right? Is this not right? If you're not having doubt, you're not pushing the boundaries far enough.
One of the things I advise entrepreneurs to do is when you have an idea, a classic entrepreneurial impulse is to hold the idea close to you and not go tell people because, oh, the idea is so special.
Right.
That's almost always a mistake. Go talk to
Why is that a mistake? Yeah.
It's a mistake because your actual real competitive advantage is not that you have this idea that you have locked away in your closet, which may or may not be accurate and you have no idea which it is. Your actual competitive advantage is if you're assembling the intelligence around, does this idea work? What is the right team? What is the right learnings? And we're essentially in motion.
Like me, have to do everything 3 times before we get it right. Thankfully, I know that. So I know that I have to get up early and try it 5 times because the 8-year-old will be able to get past it in 2 times. So I have to be on my feet longer, but at least I know it. And so I just go at stuff. And it served me very well, in that my resume is pretty varied, and I have a pretty interesting life. I get to do different stuff and have a bit of access, because I just said, yeah, I'll try that. I mean, why would I hold back?
I think success, first of all, is knowing my purpose in life. As I have watched and observed successful people, what I have discovered about them is they really have figured out why they're here. They really do have their act together. And knowing their purpose in life is a stability for them. So that when everyone else is rocking and rolling and things are a little unsteady and people are kind of leaving the ship and people are kind of abandoning their causes, these people, they hold steady right throughout the storm because they have a true North Star. They truly are focused. It becomes an anchor in their life that just holds them steady. And the anchor is a confidence based upon a knowledge of purpose.
And there are a lot of people from whom we can learn a lot. And I think the one piece of advice is don't underestimate anyone you come across ever. Right. Like whether they're, a blue collar worker waiting for the bus, or they're, helping you they're the server or bartender at the restaurant, or they're a lower ranking employee. I mean, the smartest leaders I've ever seen have always gone around the room and asked for everybody's opinion.
I don't pay no attention to what they say about me. All I do is just do what I have to do and get paid, and that's it. But I don't really pay no attention to the rules of boxing. I don't pay no attention. I defy all the rules. I've added pages to the book of boxing.
The world is a hurting place, and the world needs hope, and the world needs love. Without hope, we feel like, why are we here? Well, brokenness. Here's mine. Today, I still have no arms, no legs, but everything's changed. Everything. For me, I was looking for hope and happiness, and I couldn't see it for many years. In fact, if this side of the table represents my hope, truth encourages me to become all that I can be. But then we have lies every day coming in our mind, people who discourage us. You know the people that you have in your life who, no matter how good of a day you're having, they'll bring you down. Or no matter how bad of a day you're having, they'll bring you even lower. You know what I'm talking about? Think of the 3 biggest discouragers in your life. They're not your biggest discouragers. You are. You are. It only takes 3 seconds for me to tell you something discouraging. But then you may never forget my words.
A lot of times I'll be in a 200-mile run or something like that, and I'm all jacked up. Body's broken, mind's broken, spirit's broken. I start to say, what if I can pull this off? When I first walked into the Navy SEAL recruiter's office, he looked at me and said, there's only been 35 African Americans in 70 years make it through. You know what I said to myself? What if I can be the 36th? It's the what if I can pull off a miracle. What if I can become someone that no one thinks I can be? And just me talking about that, I have the hair going up on my arms. because it makes me just like, what if I can be that guy that people who call nigger and this and that, and now I'm speaking at Tom Ferry's event.
It's so hard. I thought doing this research, I thought going into it, there were authentic people and inauthentic people. I did not find any evidence of that at all. What I found is authenticity is a practice, and you choose it every day, sometimes every hour of every day. And it's a practice. It's not, I just wake up and, hey, I'm authentic.
Well, for me, I mean, yeah, you visualize where you want to be and what you want to accomplish, and you kind of get lost in the process of day-to-day, grinding it out and working, pulling on ours if you have to. It's just about not losing vision and not losing sight of what you're trying to accomplish, no matter what hurdles you have to go through. So I think that kind of relates to whatever you're doing, whatever major you've chosen or what you're interested in. So for me in basketball, and it's about visualizing, whether you write it down, put it on the wall, do something, what your goals are, and get lost in the process of day-to-day grind, day-to-day getting better every single day. Asking questions, aligning yourself with people that have been through it before, that are experienced, and leaning on that advice, and just trying to outwork the next person, and that's the biggest thing.
How do you think about making a decision when everyone tells you this is a crazy idea? Or where do you get the internal strength to do that?
Well, first of all, I'd say I actually think I feel fear quite strongly. So it's not as though I just have the absence of fear. I feel it quite strongly. But there are just times when something is important enough, you believe in it enough, that you do it in spite of the fear.
So speaking of important things,
like people shouldn't think people shouldn't think, well, I feel fear about this and therefore I shouldn't do it. It's normal to feel fear. Like there'd have to be something mentally wrong if you didn't feel fear.
So you just feel it and let the importance of it drive you to do it anyway.
Yeah, actually, something that can be helpful is fatalism, to some degree. If you just accept the probabilities, then that diminishes fear. When starting SpaceX, I thought the odds of success were less than 10%, and I just accepted that actually probably I would just lose everything. But that maybe would make some progress if we could just move the ball forward. Even if we died, maybe some other company could pick up the baton and keep moving it forward, so that would still do some good. Yeah, same with Tesla. I thought the odds of a car company succeeding were extremely low.
Most startups that fail do it ultimately because they did not make something that people wanted. They made something that, that they thought people would want, but they were either in denial about it, whether it was actually any good, or somebody else came along and made something that people wanted even more.
And so it's not just about doing focus groups, it's not just about double checking your vision, it really is about integrating this concept of testing our ideas rigorously throughout the product development process, throughout the marketing process, even as we scale up.
The hardest thing to do is start. You have all these ideas and everyone has an idea, but it's really about executing the idea and building the idea and attracting other people to help you work on the idea. That is the biggest challenge. But the way to begin is to get the idea out of your head, draw it out, talk about it, program it if you're a programmer, or make it if you're building something.
And so when we're coming up with ideas, we always ask ourselves, what kind of new market is this creating? And then also what part of my day and what problem is it solving? And so I've gone as far as taking an entire catalog of my day from the moment I open my eyes and writing down every single thing I do. And then asking myself, is there something here?
Don't necessarily think that you have to have the home run and the huge Apple computer on your first start. I spent a long time in my life with skills just building little devices for fun. For fun is one of the key things, because that drives you to think and think and think and make it better and better and better than you ever would if you're doing it for a company. Build things at first for yourself that you would want.
First of all, you have to treat yourself like you matter, because if you don't, then you don't take care of yourself and you become vengeful and cruel. and you take it out on people around you, and you're not a positive force. None of that's good. So you suffer more, and so does everyone around you. And there's a malevolence that enters into it. None of that's good. So that's what happens if you don't treat yourself like you matter. And then, well, what happens if you don't treat other people like they matter? Well, you lie to them, you cheat them, you steal, you enter into impulsive relationships with them. They can't trust you. That doesn't go anywhere. They don't like you. You end up alone at best, and maybe like incarcerated at worst. Like, that doesn't work. And so you watch the people around you who thrive, regardless of what they say. They act out the proposition that everyone matters. And then you have a functional society. And I think, okay, well, if when you act out the proposition that everyone matters, you have a functional society, maybe that's evidence that that proposition is true. It's like, I think it's true.
If you're not coming up with 10 ideas a day, that's why I have this thing. If I'm not filling up this page every single day, then my idea muscle will atrophy. And I started this in 2001, and I still do it every single day. Like, you have to come up with ideas every single day, or the idea muscle atrophies. The good news is, after about 6 months of doing that, you're like a machine. Like, people get surprised at how many ideas you could just have.
What this all comes down to is doing something exceptional for your users, whether it's in community, whether it's in connection, or whether it's in design. This is our big advantage as a startup, is that we can actually get away with doing this. We can make this the core part of why we're doing business.